Oh, you went really fuzzy.
Oh, sorry. I don't know
Hi,
why.
everyone. I look fine, so I don't know what your problem
Yeah, you look good. I
is.
look really odd. Hang on.
Hi, everyone. It's me and Posie. You can't really see her. It looks like you're like some kind of modern art piece. You can
It
see
looks
your
like I've gone
lipstick
through.
and your eyes a bit.
You know when people go no filter on like Instagram and they're using all the filters in the world? That's what this looks like. That's
I like
that's
a
what I've got going
filter and
on.
I like these airbrushing apps, but I don't understand why people can't see. You have to be very subtle with your filtering and your airbrushing. Otherwise, it looks like you've really filtered and airbrushed yourself. And it's just embarrassing because you're looking at this photo of this person. It's like, you don't look like that at all. This app put makeup on you. That's not even your makeup, so that looks weird. But also, like, your face is blurred out and totally different. And what's going to happen when you meet people in real life and they're like, oh, you're ugly? Because maybe
Oh,
they're people who don't meet people in real life.
wow, I'm having a bad hair moment because I've have I been on the TV today?
Well, it's great that it's all pixelated then.
Yeah, great. Something's
Why?
gone weird on my internet, but anyway, is it just us?
There's lots of us here. There's 75 of us.
Oh yeah,
Well,
I
there's
oh
us and then us plus 75.
well, I just switched from private chat to comments, and I was like, "There's no one in the chat," but
You're
there
like,
is.
Megan, nobody watches your YouTube channel. Why did you trick me into doing
I'm
this?
I'm so sorry that I'm blurry. Is it? I don't know
I
how
don't know what
blurry
happened
I
because
am.
you weren't blurry, and then as soon as I went live, you went blurry.
Is
Like,
that is the word woman blurry on my microphone?
yeah, everything's pretty
The whole
blurry.
thing, amazing.
Is that
Let
like
me
an
just.
internet thing or what? I
I
don't
think
know how
so.
this
It
works.
has been weird.
Test, test, test.
Ever
Can
ever
you
since
hear me
I went a
okay?
bit
Maybe
crazy.
mic up.
Normally it's
Okay,
you.
everyone, can you? I know, usually, I know. So I'm in Mexico City, and so my Wi Fi, I think, is actually okay for once. I mean, I should knock on wood because we'll see if I start cutting out and going janky. But usually I'm at home in Sayulita where all the Wi Fi is janky and all of my streams are janky as a result. I also have a new mic um, that was gifted to me because I can't.
You're just
This is
like,
how I
"Oh,
show
let's
off
give
my
him a
new
new
mic.
mic,"
Hey
and then
guys,
it's like
check it out.
massive thing comes in a shot. I'm so sorry, people, that it's all blurry. I don't know what Megan's doing, like phallic weird things with microphones.
That's okay.
Um,
Does everybody?
okay,
Okay,
I've
do
got
I?
Ethernet. I've
Okay,
got
sorry. Go
Ethernet and
ahead.
everything. I'm so sorry,
It's weird because it
people.
was totally fine, and then all of a sudden it went weird. Okay, wait. So first of all, everybody who's watching, okay, yeah, they say Megan clear, Kelly very blurry. So they're seeing what I'm seeing. Can
I'm
you guys
just gonna.
hear me? Okay, is my mic? This is my new fancy, expensive mic that a man bought for me because I'm not an independent woman.
You
My boyfriend bought
sound.
me a new mic as a belated birthday present, and my birthday was in October.
Oh, that is belated. Wow,
I
I'm not
didn't
so
get
impressed
anything.
now.
Well, I didn't get a birthday present in October, so anyway.
You
Well,
actually
okay,
going
you
out
look
in
a
the
bit
sun?
better right now. You look slightly
Okay,
less
I've shut
fuzzy.
everything on my computer. I
Okay.
shut everything except this.
Well, whatever. We
Sorry.
can hear you. We can't see your lumpy face, so maybe it's all for the best. Kellie-Jay told me her face looked lumpy before we started, so she's pretending she doesn't know what's happening, but she
I don't know what you're
pixelated
talking
herself
about.
on
I never
purpose.
said anything. You're so rude. Um, check your settings. Change to 1080. So is that settings in StreamYard? Oh God.
Oh, I wonder. I mean, we were in StreamYard before, so I don't know what would have changed. But you can change your video settings in StreamYard, or I can on my end anyway.
Is that better?
Nope.
Oh, well, you were wrong. Band United. Call yourself a moderator. Yeah, no, it's not. Yeah, I was on 1080. I was on 480 and now I'm on 1080 and it's no better. Let's try high definition. I look fine on here, but I guess that's not traveling anywhere. Right,
Oh,
let's just stop talking about it. There's nothing I can do.
whatever. Guys, this is
Sorry.
Kellie-Jay. You can tell by the blonde this part and the red lips.
Is it that bad? I'm gonna
It's
have to
pretty
go to
pixelated.
YouTube and see.
But your sound's good, so that's good. That's the important thing. The important
Let's
thing
do
is
an
that you're
audio.
here.
Do an audio interview. Anyway, hi Megan, how are you?
Well, my hair is really dirty. That's why it's up in this weird janky bun. Don't look too close at it. I'll put my head back here.
I think you should have had a blurry picture, really.
Maybe I should have had a book. Thanks.
Oh, I am really pixelated.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah. I don't
Just
know
trying
what
to switch off
happened.
my Wi-Fi, which might kill everything. It's not working, is it? Okay. Can you still see me though?
Yeah, you're still
Ish.
pixelated, but
Okay, right. Look, everybody knows it's me. They also know what I look like.
she's very beautiful.
That's what I was looking at. Okay.
So you've returned from the United States of America. Tell me what you crossed the pond for.
Well, I was invited to speak in New York City on the Wednesday by Jennifer Lal, and it was brilliant. So we had Libby Emmons, Natasha Chart, myself, Beth Stelzer, I think that's how you say her name, and Jennifer. And it was just a sort of talk what's going on. And Jennifer is a very successful filmmaker, so she's making a film. So that was great. And I was like, amazing. And then we looked at flights, and it was just fortuitously, it's much cheaper, like by a country mile, to fly many days apart to New York. So I booked that flight, and then I was like, oh God, I've got a lot of time. And you and I talked, Megan, about doing something in New York, and we just couldn't organize it at all. It was so difficult.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not an organizer to begin with, but from afar, it's hard to plan
it's just
things
too
like
hard.
that.
It was just too hard. And
Yeah.
So
Very unfortunate because we wanted to do a thing where you guys could come hang out with us and we would talk at you and then you would talk with us. It would be very friendly.
well, not so much with us.
A little bit with us. If you pay the big bucks, you can talk with us. It's worth it, we swear.
$5 a minute. So then I sort of contacted Cara and I was like, hey Cara, I'm coming to New York, but I could easily come down to Washington. And she suggested the White House, so that was great. Someone says Kellie-Jay is looking a little white chicks.
That's true. You do look a little white chick.
Oh, yay. There's a joke there that I can't possibly say because it's far too crude and it's just not in keeping with my reputation. I'll text it to you. I'll text it to you, Megan, later. Okay. So anyway, so then I planned that, and then Beth contacts me and said, "Oh, we're going to go to Atlanta and go to the swimming competition where Lia Thomas is swimming." And there was also an opportunity to do the UN and go and protest outside the UN, just a sort of protest where it needs to be said rather than a mass gathering. So we did that. And so, yeah, it was a really big trip. And then I got invited to do Tim Pool. And I was like,
oh, did you do Tim Pool?
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
Have you been on his?
No, they invited me on kind of just after COVID started. And it just seemed too complicated then for me to travel to the US. And then it kind of fell off. So yeah. I have never done that yet. But I know him. Like we've chatted online and things like that, but yeah, no, I haven't done the show yet. How was the experience?
Yeah, that was great. I thought that was going to be the biggest news, because people knew I was going to the White House. Nobody knew I was going to go to Lia Thomas, but that's an unpredictable, unquantifiable success. You just don't know whether you're going to get kicked out or whatever. But actually, I think I broke a bit of a spell. I think I did something pretty great, which is very immodest.
As usual. Do you guys It looks like you froze on your end, Kelly. I can still hear your audio fine, but the picture froze. Is she frozen for you guys who are
I've got
watching?
myself on YouTube here so I can see
Are
just
you
how bad it
okay?
is. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, then there's something
I
weird
mean, it is
happening with
really
you.
bad. I have no idea why it would be.
Okay, well, whatever. Let's not dwell on that.
Okay.
Okay, so tell us about what happened in Atlanta. Tell us from the beginning to the end. Tell us everything that you did.
So when we got to our hotel the next morning, I get a frantic message that we are actually in the same hotel as Lia Thomas. And so he's at
Wow.
breakfast, this hunking great big, like 6'4" guys at breakfast. And they're like, come down. Oh, you could come down. It'd be great. And I'm like, no, because if we confront him at all, it has to be with the maximum impact. So I'm not going to do that.
You don't want to waste the big moment on
Not
something that
really. You
won't
don't want
be.
him to leave the hotel. I mean, someone said, oh, you could, you might put him off his race. And I was like, I want him to win. I don't want to put him off his race. I want him to be there bold as brass, with balls on. It's just
Yeah, the
no.
story's better if he wins, I suppose.
100%. Nothing is going to break this if he comes third, because everyone go, well, I thought you said he was not advantage. He was advantaged and he'd thrash everyone. He threw the second couple of races.
Did he
and then-
really?
he wasn't even. He didn't even look like he was trying. So he won the really long race. It's like I want to say 1,500 yards, but we do everything in meters over here. But it was
I
a
thought
lot
there
of
was like a
length.
500-meter freestyle that he won. Is that
Well,
right?
there is a freestyle. I thought it was yards.
I don't know what a yard is.
It was like 20 lengths, this particular thing.
Okay.
And the only reason I know that is they keep sticking in the race the numbers so the swimmers
500
can see.
miles. It wouldn't be 500 miles. 500 meters. I'm like a total idiot. I'm not gonna even try to guess at this anymore because I'm probably.
Well, I think it's
embarrassingly
yards.
wrong.
Anyway,
Okay.
so he races and then he gets interviewed, and during his race, I get talking to a woman who initially I thought was male because she was clearly of Asian descent and she had a mask on and hair, and the swimming pool noise, you can't hear the sort of strangulated testosterone voice. You can just hear, when you just take your cues, and I thought it was, I thought she was a man. And then at one point she said, well, if he's a man, then I'm a woman. I was like, oh, you're a woman then. Because I said, Lia Thomas is a man. And she said, well, if he's a man, I'm a woman. So I'm like, oh, you're a woman.
Was
then.
she actually a man?
No, she's actually a woman. She was saying that she identifies as a man.
Oh, okay.
And he identified. So she said, well, if he's a man, I'm a woman. I was like, you're a woman then.
And what were you talking to this woman about? What was happening? Did you have an altercation?
Well, I was commenting on Lia Thomas on my live stream YouTube, which, as we can see, my technology always goes so well. So it's fortuitous that there was somebody else next to me. And anyway, so we have this conversation, and she's sort of trying to pretend that there is no difference, and she can't possibly see that there is a difference between the man in the pool and all the girls. And then she says, I said, look, I'm a woman. That's not a woman. Does he have a male body? And then I said to her, do you have ovaries? And she said, can I ask you a question? And I was like, yeah. She said it again. And I said, yeah, you can ask me a question. Are you a biologist? And I was like, oh, God, what stupid, how ridiculous. I was like, I'm not a vet, but I know what a dog is.
Yeah.
And that went super viral.
You're like,
crazy viral.
I'm not an architect. I know what a house is.
My other thing was I'm
not a mathematician. I know that 2 + 2 = 4.
Yeah. But I just came up with this one, and it seems to have a little bit of a something.
Yeah, that's a good one. I saw that one going around. Yeah, there was you probably saw this clip, but there was a Judge Jackson was asked to define woman, and she said the same thing. She said, Well, I'm not a biologist, so no, I couldn't possibly define a woman.
It's insane that anybody would pretend they don't know what a woman is.
Why do you think people do that?
Well, because if you say what a woman is, you definitely exclude. If you're not a moron and you don't do a circular definition, you definitely exclude men from the definition of woman. And so she'd be called transphobic. So she won't do it. I just think this ideology is very fragile. You can't admit any of it is complete nonsense. Otherwise, it all is.
I just want to let everyone know that if they want to ask a question to Kellie-Jay, then please use the super chat because I can't keep up with the live chat at all. I'm hardly seeing anything that you're saying. I'm very sorry. But if I look over there, then I get distracted and then I'm not listening to Posie, which is more rude than not being able to pay close attention to the live chat.
Yeah.
I'm trying to mitigate rudeness here, levels of rudeness. So how did you think, like, did you get any impression of what the other female swimmers were feeling about all this, about having to compete against a man, and in this particular case, in that one freestyle race, losing to a man?
Well, what I saw girls walking up. There's a lot of camaraderie between the girls. Not necessarily going into the race because they are focused as hell. There's a lot of sort of thigh slapping and arm slapping and stretching, and you can see these women have got this absolute focus of winning that race. But they must know when they enter a race with Lia Thomas that might not be possible straight off. So we saw the photo where three of them sort of bunch up to take a photo together and he's not in it. And then I think the girl who did that has come out and said, "Oh no, we really support Lia." And I'm thinking, well, you're an idiot then.
I mean, do you think that all are idiots? Like, I know that some of the swimmers, excuse me, wrote a letter. Some of the UPenn swimmers wrote a letter anonymously. I think that was there 4 swimmers who wrote the letter anonymously who
I
are
don't know.
challenging Lia's participation. I mean, so do you feel like it's frustrating that more of the female swimmers aren't speaking out publicly, that the only ones who did remained anonymous, or that more aren't in general? Do you feel like that's understandable given their circumstances?
Well, I think there's a lot of grown women that aren't speaking out who have far less to lose than their entire futures. So I think we've got to be really mindful. There's also a little bit of a inverse snobbery when people are like, "Oh, these are elite girls," and like, so what? They have worked their asses off. Now, look, I think if somebody could gather them collectively and they could all do a collective action of turning their backs at the start of the race or refusing to step up or something, doing something as a collective, which would definitely totally change the entire kind of circumstances for them, then I think that would be beneficial. But what one girl knows is that she will lose all of her friends at university. She will definitely lose her place on the team. That might mean she loses a scholarship and loses her place at university. And these girls, many of them are going to really great universities, which lead on to very successful careers. So she's not just making a stand against unfairness and the NCAA and the Olympics or whatever professional body it is. She's actually totally making a sacrifice of her own future. Now, I would like to think that if I was in that situation, and I have no idea, I would like to think that I wouldn't mind, that I would feel so righteous about it, that I would sacrifice my future for the sake of other girls' futures. But we can't really ask anybody to do that. That has to come from them.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder what I would do in that situation also. Like, knowing me, I'm very bad at not saying what I think and causing problems if there should be a problem
that is
to
what
be
they say about
caused.
you.
I'm sure you can relate. But, I think you're right that it's hard to do anything on your own, especially when these are athletes and they've worked, much of their lives to compete at the level they're competing at and possibly win, and to have this career and to lose all that to say something on their own when none of their fellow athletes are speaking up. I think that is hard to ask. And I think you're right. I mean, there's so many women around the world, you know, privileged women, middle-class women, wealthy women who are saying nothing and have nothing to lose. Like, they're not going to lose their jobs or their careers or anything. And they're old enough to be established. And they're probably financially secure. And they're not saying anything, which, you know, is shocking and appalling. And really, that's just about, I think, fitting in socially. It's one thing because I think I'm sorry, I got sick last week, so I'm just gonna cough and clear my throat this whole time. Excuse me. That's better. It's one thing to there's several important reasons why I think people should be speaking up, or two primarily, I suppose. And one of those is, of course, like the rights of women and girls, and this is unjust and this is clearly wrong, and it's harming women and girls on like a really big level. But then also, like, I don't know how people can live with themselves. I do not know how you can live with yourself pretending that a man's a woman. Like, you're lying to yourself. Like, it's not only lacking in integrity in terms of social, cultural, like publicly, like, you're failing and destroying the lives of hundreds of thousands of women and girls around the world. More than that, even if we're talking about losing sex-based rights for all women. But like, how do you live with yourself when you lie to yourself? Like, do you think that any of these people actually believe it inside their brains? This is what I can never figure out. I'm like, you're lying and you know that you're lying and you're just saying, well, I don't want to deal with controversy, like, whatever, who cares? What difference does it make? Or do you think that there are people who really, really, truly convince themselves that this is true and right and just?
Well, there are girls and boys at universities in America who have been through the school system, unbeknownst to us, for the last however long, being indoctrinated into this. So, I mean, you can be indoctrinated into anything and truly believe it. So I don't think very many grown-ups, like fully fledged grown-ups, I don't think that justice today, that judge, I don't think she really didn't know what a woman was. And I think what's very sinister about her, if I can just digress, is that she felt it was more likely to get on the Supreme Court, get into the Supreme Court, a position of whatever it's called, saying that than telling the truth. Now, I think that is a very shaky, dodgy, sinister step for the United States of America, that a Supreme Court justice would rather tell an ideological lie than a truth. So that's quite scary. But outside of Georgia Aquatic Center, there were a group of protesters, and there was one girl, and she looked like she should be in like a really cool movie. And she was talking. I really thought any second she was going to cry. And she was sort of saying, every time she couldn't answer something, she was calling us transphobic and names, and saying that we were hateful and disgusting, and going back to the trope of, why do you want trans women to die? Why do you hate transgender people? Why do you want them not to have jobs? And all these like crazy things that wasn't being discussed at all. But I just said to her at one point, I just said, what is a woman? And she just went, she just couldn't speak. And I said, is there not a small part of you somewhere that is thinking, I can't answer a really simple, really easy question? I said, because that should frighten you. You should feel afraid that something's happened to your thinking, that you can't actually answer that question. But she couldn't. She was too frightened.
And she was just there on her own. Was she there specifically to challenge you all?
Yeah, so she was across the road. So they had like the women from Save Women Sports were on this side of the road, and then she was on the other with others. And she sort of walked past, I think, and called us some names, and then women started talking. But it's just crazy. The grown man reporter from ESPN, he used preferred pronouns. He wouldn't hear anything of not using stupid, nonsensical words for men. It's just crazy. And so after that race, after I'd had this, I'm not a vet, but I know what a dog is moment. Lia Thomas was then being interviewed because he won, and I shouted, "He's a man, he's a man," and I shouted that twice. So that was quite good.
And how did people respond when you said that?
I got so many thank yous the next day. So many thank you. Well, I was wearing a T-shirt that said "That man is a cheat," so that was good. But I got so many people going, "Thank you so much. Thank you for what you do." Some people actually knew who I was, which I thought was quite interesting. Not from shouting, "That is a man," but knew who I was anyway. The overwhelming feeling of people going in. I mean, look, the reason I shouted, "He's a man," is because I was in a room full of people who knew he was a man.
Yeah.
And nobody would say it. And I just felt somebody had to say it. I mean, it's boring to keep saying the emperor's new clothes.
Yeah.
But it really did feel that somebody in that room had to say it. And so I said, and I'm quite good at saying things that other people might not say. And so I said it.
And what about the reaction, like actually within the room? Did people react?
Not really, because it's quite noisy. A few people sort of looked up, but I mean, there was applause, but I'm assuming that was because he'd finished what he was saying rather than for me. So I can't claim that applause, but you know, I could say that loads of people cheered and they all clapped.
Okay, great. And then there was another clip that I saw where you were arguing with a man about, and it sounded like, but I don't know if I got this confused. Like from the clip, I got the impression that you were arguing with a man who was trying to get into the women's washroom.
No.
What happened? What was that?
So the other women I was with, they sort of started trying to talk to him, and there was a little bit of a tone of, yeah, we've had a really great time. And I think as if that was to make him think, oh, they've had a great time. That's a terrible thing, right? Which I don't think he was getting that from that. He was like, hey, girls, sort of thing. And they were like, Dawn.
Hey, fellow ladies.
And I was watching and I was thinking, is nobody gonna say what I feel needs to be said? And so I recorded it on my phone down low, but a reporter was sat there, so she thankfully recorded it from a much nicer angle. And I just said, if you go to my YouTube or my Instagram, it shows everything from the beginning of the conversation. So I just said, I'm here from Standing for Women. And for the safety and dignity of women and girls, I just want to ask you, do you use women's spaces? And he went, I'm a woman. And I was like, do you use women's private spaces? I'm a woman. When you use women's private spaces, do you understand that you make women and girls uncomfortable? I've never had anyone say anything to me. And I was like, well, that's because they're intimidated. So let me just tell you. And then I just tell him that when he uses those spaces, he makes women and girls uncomfortable. And then he started interrupting. And I just do that mum thing. I don't know. I do it. I went, and carried on talking. And he didn't like that very much. He really didn't like that very much. And he said, call off your dog to Beth Stelzer. And then he also said, I said, look, he said, oh, my girls. And I said, well, look, fortunately.
My girls, like his daughters?
Yeah. He's tweeted about breastfeeding his son.
Oh, this is somebody that you knew?
Yeah, Oh, I'd already seen him as like quite an extreme autogynephile. Like there is evidence of him all over the place as quite an extreme autogynephile. And his little smirky smirk, his sort of, there's something creepy as hell about his enjoying this interaction. And whilst I would rather not give that man any attention, what I think was important about it, the only reason it was important, it was caught on camera in a way of sort of saying, we don't have to pretend we can tell these men. Now, I don't mean if you're in a toilet on your own and a great big man comes in that you should challenge him if you don't feel that you're going to be safe. I don't mean that at all. I just mean he's quite a famous man. He swapped his identity 3 times. So he was married, then he claimed to be a woman. I think his wife left him on that basis. Then he said he had amnesia and wasn't a woman at all and went back to being a man.
He said he had amnesia, actually.
Yeah. And his wife made him do it, I think.
Word.
Then she died.
Oh.
And all I'm going to say here, people, is go and have a look at what he dresses like, what his hair is like, and what the hair of his dead wife and her style was. Because I don't know if it is a coincidence. I'm just saying that.
What is this guy's name?
His name is Don Ennis, Ennis, and he also goes by Dawn, which is funny because in American accents, that's the same name. Dawn.
Yeah.
What's the difference? Like over
But
here,
not
it'd be
in
Dawn and Dawn.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yeah.
It's like
I would say
Dawn.
Dawn.
Yeah.
Dawn.
So he,
Convenient.
yeah. Look, he was. I mean, he again is a perfect. It's a perfect example, and people sort of seem to think that he's unusual in his autogynephilic, fetishy grin and his like real disregard for women's safety. His enjoyment, part of his enjoyment, is to make us feel unsafe and uncomfortable. I just don't think he's unusual. I think a man with genuine gender dysphoria, who goes through adolescence with gender dysphoria, I think that is unusual for men that present as men who call themselves trans of any description.
I mean, to me, I've said this before, so apologies for being repetitive, but any man who's going into women's spaces like washrooms, like change rooms, like spaces that he knows are for women and that women are probably going to feel uncomfortable if he's there, I think is like
a predator.
A predator. Like, why would anybody do something intentionally disrespectful that's going to make people who you know are vulnerable feel more vulnerable and unsafe? You would do that because you're an abusive person.
Yeah. Yeah, I've made similar points. I think it's obvious, right? And it's really interesting that as soon as you switch from saying man to trans woman or woman, the whole conversation, the whole aspect, everything about it ceases to be seen for exactly what it is. And that's how they've got away with it. That's how, some people clearly have said that I've harassed this man when I'm standing in a corridor, just simply asking him some questions for a very short amount of time. And
so they wouldn't call it harassment if it was somebody who liberal feminist or third wave feminist or whatever you want to call them. All these terms are imperfect. But, if it was a progressive woman who was harassing a man or asking questions of a man that made him feel uncomfortable or that seemed rude or whatever, if they believed him to be an abuser or a predator, whether they knew or not. I mean, look at all this Me Too stuff. I mean,
yeah. Well, imagine if I was asking Trump those questions, nobody would say I was harassing Trump.
Exactly. Because he's a bad guy. And trans women, I suppose, have been painted as perpetual inherent victims.
It's so weird when men say it's the hardest thing to go through. No, it's not. What, changing your clothes?
You could just change your clothes back.
Oh, I was just so troubled. I couldn't quite put the dress on.
You don't have to wear those clothes.
I couldn't go out the house in my dress. Oh, why don't you just change your clothes, Nigel?
Imagine if you and I couldn't leave the house without being in a dress and heels and with our makeup fully done. Usually when I leave the house, I'm wearing running shoes and like leggings and a big man's tank top. Sometimes even worse than that. Sometimes I look much grubbier than that. I'm often wearing dirty Converse and tube socks and cut-off shorts, and I feel like that's a pretty easy thing to wear. Like, why is it the hardest thing in the world? You don't have to. What's gonna happen if you don't put your makeup and your dress on?
Well, like a woman living in a car with her kids and she's going, "Do you know what, darling? We've got it bad. But those men that are transgender women, they've got it so much worse. I know you're hungry, babe." It's like, that is not the hardest thing at all. It's just
And
very
do they think, I
nothing more
mean, they're
entitled.
obviously not aware of anything, but do they think that women don't alter their appearances when they leave their houses to avoid being harassed? You know, why is that out of the realm of possibility for these so-called trans women?
It's just also nuts. It's also nuts. It's so annoying.
Okay, so do
Um,
you know, I want to ask you, do you know specifics about Lia Thomas? When did Lia Thomas transition, or when did Lia Thomas start identifying as a woman?
so these are the things I've heard. These are not the things I know.
Okay.
I don't know how long he has been identifying as female, but he was in the males races, what, 4 years ago? He's been taking testosterone suppressants for 2.5 years. I mean,
Okay.
let's like, he's not very old. And I'm imagining testosterone suppressants, right? So middle-aged men, for example, one of the reasons men have midlife crises is because their testosterone drops. And so
Mm.
the infallibility and the confidence of testosterone wanes a little bit. Now, we don't have testosterone. So when girls try and pretend to be men and they take testosterone, they feel like confident, euphoric, their depression goes, their anxiety goes. So I would imagine when you lose your testosterone for middle-aged men, and that's why they buy cars and have affairs, um,
Mm.
you you kind of feel a bit crap. So I'm not saying that Lia Thomas is a good person. I don't think he is. I think he's an entitled man who shouldn't be in those spaces. I think it is predatory behavior. However, a very young man in the prime of his life is suppressing his testosterone. Like that, if we forget about all the other harm that he does, that's a terrible thing. I
Mhm.
mean, these are your most virile years as a man, right? And he's suppressing all that. Now, I don't know how much harm suppressing testosterone does, like in the next 5 minutes of his life or 5 years of his life. But I do know that I think that is a fundamental harm that should not just be brushed aside just because he's also not a great human.
Do you think that he did this intentionally, specifically just because he wanted to win races? Or do you think he actually has some kind of autogynephilia or some version of gender dysphoria? I don't like the term gender dysphoria, and I
No,
don't particularly believe in that, but
no, me neither.
is he
I don't think he's
confused?
got
Does he
gender
have some kind of
dysphoria.
mental illness?
Well, look, my view on gender dysphoria, and I know I used the term earlier, so I will clarify. My view on gender dysphoria is there are all sorts of things that people focus on their bodies to try and solve something that's going on in their brain. Whatever that, but it could be a trauma, it could be being ostracized, it could simply wanting to be popular, right? And people can focus on that. You know, where you've got cutting when people focus on pain, you've got anorexia where people focus on being skinny, you've got blokes or women that focus on bodybuilding or whatever. So we can all do those things. So I can imagine that there is something where you focus on simply being male or female as the source of every single thing in your life that is wrong. Whether I would call that gender dysphoria for a start, I wouldn't, because gender isn't even a thing as far as I'm concerned. So when I use gender dysphoria, I think that would be a response to trauma. Do I think Lia Thomas is responding somehow to childhood trauma? No, I don't. I think it's far more likely that he has been sucked into a world of trans fetish porn, or just copious amounts of porn, has come out the other side as an autogynephile. I mean, I don't know that. I would. This is simply what I suspect. What is quite typical. But that's certainly nothing that I would assert with absolute confidence in his case. I just believe it to be so.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, none of us know for sure at this point. But I mean, I think that the porn aspect is really under talked about and not understood as an aspect of transgenderism for men, at least men who transition to women, probably because it's kind of an uncomfortable, gross thing to talk about. And as well as the autogynephilia thing. But of course, it seems rude because it's rude to say, "Oh, this is just a fetish." Like you're just turned on at the idea of appearing as a woman or passing as a woman, or by the idea of being a woman, or you're just turned on by wearing women's clothing. That's a fetish. Like a lot of these guys have talked about, including Caitlyn Jenner, famously, of course, starting to put on their mother's clothes or their sister's clothes as kids, even, like our teenagers.
I think people forget how strong the fetishy urge is and how overwhelming it can be. Now, I don't feel sorry for anyone with a fetish.
Me neither. I feel sorry for them because can you imagine if in order to get off, like during sex, I know you're much more polite than I am, so you don't have to say anything about this, but like if in order to like orgasm, you had to have like an outfit on. If there had to
I know
be
someone
a
who went on a
certain
first date.
scenario.
I
Yeah.
know somebody went on a first date and the guy took his fetish for her to wear. She had to wear something that he liked. And I
Did
was
she
like,
do it?
yep. And I said, do you realize that that was no longer about you? That was just about the fetish. And she was like, no, because I was like, yes.
Yeah, it was
Because
just his fantasy that he wanted to play out. It could have been anybody.
Yeah. And I think with porn, a bit like anything actually, anything that sort of triggers certain parts of your brain, it just stops being enough. And so you just go on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, don't you? And it's just a progression into that's why women in marriages often have husbands that watch porn and they've sort of been bludgeoned until they think it's normal. That's what men do. I'm like, that's not what men do. That's what some men do. You don't have to accept it in your own home with
Well, and
him telling you it's
women,
normal.
yeah, and women do this thing. I was talking about this last night on Patreon with a friend of mine. Like the fact that so many women, probably especially young women, I would say, have threesomes with their boyfriends, and why they're not lesbians. So why would you do that? Why would you want to have a threesome with your partner and another girl? This is what I'm talking about. Her, another girl, her boyfriend, and it's of course because women think that they have to keep their male partner sexually interested. And in order to do that, they have to play out these porny fantasies. And a man would never do that. Can you imagine a man being like racking his brain? Like, how do I keep my girlfriend sexually interested in me? Or like, what scenarios should I play out? I mean, besides like basic things like being nice and loving towards her and buying her flowers and trying to be like romantic and a caring person, which does really work.
Although
Like,
that is the difference between the sexes. I mean, as well as it's not very nice, and I don't know why women would do it. Although I do know, I know two men, two different. So I know two women who were going out with men, who men wanted to introduce a third person, and it was men. And I was like, "Your boyfriend's gay," and they like, "No, he's just." I was like, "He's a, he's gay. Your boyfriend is gay. There are no heterosexual men that are wanting to bring another man into that scenario." And
no,
then
they all want to bring other chicks into the
yeah,
scenario.
well, one of them ended up. She doesn't like me anymore, so she's never going to know that I'm talking about her. One of them ended up with him. They managed to have a baby, and then it was really weird. He just really went off ever going to bed, ever. I was like, he's gay. 100%.
I mean, I just think, I mean, those are the kinds of things that I just think women should just not do. It's like, you don't have to do that. A normal man is interested in having sex. I've been in relationships with lots of men, and they're not like perfect feminist men by any means. They're not like really good men, like whatever you would think a good man is, like Justin Trudeau, That was a joke.
Well, you're in Mexico, where his family are from, so
Right, exactly. Closer than he is.
Is it Mexico? No, where
No,
is it?
they're Fidel Castro
Oh,
is his,
Cuba.
yeah,
Is that
same,
Cuba?
same. Latin America.
Oh, now I'll be accused of being a racist.
Oh, well, that ship has sailed, Posie. Let's be honest.
Yeah, sorry.
But like, normal men don't need a bunch of like toys and porny scenarios and threesomes to want to have sex with their partner. I don't think. If you don't want to have sex with your partner, you have some kind of health problem, you're depressed, like you need to work out more. Maybe it's a testosterone issue, things like that. Or it's that you watch too much fucking porn.
Yeah, I think that's the ticket.
Or maybe you don't like your partner anymore, but then you should just leave them.
Mm.
So, okay, wait, am I getting, is there something else I wanted to ask? There's some questions in the live chat that I wanted to ask you because I know you have to sign off soon because it's very late for you there.
Well, it's not just very late. I hardly slept in Atlanta. I was so excited. So I was going to bed really late, just kind of sometimes just reading the comments and going, oh my God, it's like on like the dog thing, the vet. I'm not a vet, but I know what a dog is. I mean, one person shared it was like 1.8 million. One person shared it was 1.4 million. There was like 3 people with like 850,000. It just got properly, it just that did something. And then the Dawn thing came along and that it was just so crazy. So it was very exciting. But anyway, ask me questions. I'll shut up.
Wait, but I want to ask you before I get to some of the live chat questions. So did you ever confront Lia Thomas?
No.
You never met him?
No, I mean, I could have gone out of my way to meet him, but I think if I hadn't, my whole purpose of everything I do is to raise awareness, is to start the conversations, is to allow people to know that they can say these words. Yeah. They are not words that, they have to be said aloud for people to feel that they can also say them. And they have to be seen as just the truth and not some sort of random kind of crazy extremist language. So once I'd done that and they'd been very effective, then I didn't really need to be confronting Lia Thomas.
Yeah, no, I agree with you too. I mean, I feel like so much of what I do around the gender identity issue in particular is that I just want to normalize saying normal things. Like we're not saying anything crazy. We're saying basic, obvious things that everyone knows, but I want to make it okay for people to say he when it's a man and, say things like you say, like that's a man and not have to go along with all this nonsense and to just, you don't have to have any expertise. You don't have to be a biologist. You're just going to be any regular human being. And you can say, this is unfair. It's unfair for this male to be competing against women in swimming competitions or track meets or whatever it is.
I even try to say man all the time, even if male might be more appropriate, because I feel that male has become like a word that people say because they don't want to say man.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I told you this before. I was in a Zoom meeting, a webinar thing with Baroness Nicholson, and there was a woman who I won't name, but she considers herself, and I would say that she is quite a forthright woman, and she used female bodied instead of woman. She used it, and I'm like, that's because she thinks it's more polite in front of a baroness not to say the word woman.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I agree with you. It's like if you say male or female, somehow it's like, well, technically, but in their heart and soul, they're truly a woman. And then it's differentiating between what a woman means and what female means. And I think you know what a woman is, right?
Yeah, well, also female is just a way of saying woman, isn't it? Like that in those, like people will say, oh, they must use the female toilet. Well, I don't use the female toilet. I use the women's toilets.
Yeah.
It's a women's bathroom, women's restroom, women's locker room. It's not female. I mean, sometimes it is, but I would say women's. But I'm just really nervous about when the word woman will do. I don't want to use any other word because I want that word to continue to be said where it is appropriate and proper.
Yeah, and to continue to, like, woman means, as you know, adult human female. And female is applicable to all animals, whereas women is just applicable to humans, and we're talking about human women. So give me a break. Like, it shouldn't we? I feel like it's that same thing that we talked about earlier, where the less you do it, the more, if you're going to start saying female all the time, then that becomes normalized, and it remains abnormal and offensive to say woman.
Yeah, 100%.
What we don't want. So, okay. And so what do you think came of all of this? Like the activism that you did in Atlanta, that trip that you did?
Well, it stopped the conservative men keep thinking that they're the only bloody people talking about it. Number one.
It drives me crazy. I'm so sick. I know this drives you crazy too, because you talk about it too. But, like the amount of right-wing men and like right-wing media platforms who constantly, where are all the feminists? Like, where are all the women? And it's like, we got banned from Twitter, and then you just pretended that we didn't exist. And that's where we went.
Yeah. Oh, where are we? Well, 2018, mate. I stopped being able to talk on Twitter, which apparently is the only place that you ever consider to be a place of conversation. So that's a really good thing, because I think it totally it changes that story for people that women aren't speaking up. Quite a few people have said this week, finally a woman speaking up. I'm like, I've been doing this since about 2015. I've been doing this with the significant platform since 2018.
Yeah.
You just haven't heard of me.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that we aren't all out there. So that's one amazing thing. I've had so many letters and emails. I haven't had letters. Nobody gets letters. That would be very quick from the States as well to get a letter. But I've had so many messages on social media and emails, huge amount of views, loads of people. I think it's very difficult to talk about something that I've done in such immodest language, but I'm going to anyway. For some people, that was the first time they've heard those things aloud for a long time. That anybody could say it. And I think for some people, they could exhale. Now, I'm not saying all people, I'm not saying I've changed the world. I just really do think that something has fundamentally changed on the landscape, particularly in the United States of America.
Yeah. I hope you're right. Like, obviously things are changing in terms of public opinion and in terms of people speaking out. All sorts of people who never said anything are suddenly being very loud about all this. It's frustrating that despite the fact that more and more people are calling this out and calling it for what it is, which is ridiculous and crazy, that the institutions are still proceeding.
That's because the people don't have any power, do we? And the governments don't even have any power. And the American government is insane. Well, you and I may agree on this, but we're not supposed to say, but Trump was a much better president and human than Joe Biden, who is, it's just embarrassing watching America being not governed.
He was a much better president, and it's clear to me, and I said this before the election. I said I should admit that it took me a very long time to come around to this position, and I couldn't have imagined. I'm in Canada, so I've never voted in the States before, but were I to live in the States, I couldn't imagine not voting Democrat. But But before the last election, I can't remember when it was, probably like a month before, a few weeks before, all of a sudden I was like, no, Biden is clearly far more dangerous than Trump is. And if I were living in the US, I would vote for Trump, which shocked and appalled many, many feminists, as you might know. But, like everything that we were worried about came to fruition right away.
Yeah, I don't get some of the women who voted for Biden.
No, and they're horrid to me. They're horrid, and I'm like, I didn't even vote. I just said this, but they're horrid. They're probably the same women who are horrid to you. It's probably your fault. They're also mean to me, Posie. But like, you're still friends with that bitch.
It's so. Could you honestly say this party that I am going to vote for is going to sign an executive order that will destroy women's rights on day one?
You still got to do it.
And I've said to these same people, I was like, but you still did it. They were like, yeah, because the alternative was Trump. I was like, and
What did he do? What was the terrible thing that Trump did?
but also what you're saying is that women's rights actually are less important than other issues. When you know that he's going to do that, when you know he's going to do that, you basically are saying that you quite like women, you quite like our rights, but you don't like them enough against other different rights that people may be fighting for. So
Well, but a lot of them would say abortion. They would say, well, we have to vote for the Democrats. We have to vote for Biden because
you
the
have to win the
Republicans are going to
argument.
take away abortion. And I mean, I don't think, why would Trump want to take away abortion? Trump has no desire to take away abortion. I mean, maybe that would have happened if the Republicans are in power in certain states. But as far as I understand, I'm not American, so I can't speak as an expert about American politics and legislation. But as far as I understand it, that's those laws are decided on a state-to-state basis.
Well, I think what has helped to lose abortion in the minds of so many is the industry of abortion, which is Planned Parenthood. I think if there was still, I think Mary Lou Singleton talks about this. If there was still small, women-centered, small, very focused on the health and well-being of a woman, which might actually in the end be keeping her baby or aborting her baby, but it would be very much about that woman in a women-only environment rather than Planned Parenthood making money. I think abortion would be an easier thing to win for everybody.
Hmm.
I don't think anybody is under the illusion that when you make abortion illegal, that abortion greatly reduces, because it doesn't. And so you have to have access to safe and legal abortion, no matter how you feel about it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do that. Otherwise, you do really get into some really sticky, nasty, women hating type scenarios. But if you want abortion in America, they need to properly win the argument. That's what you do. You convince people that it is right and proper. But Obama closed access to abortion, more abortion centers than any other president.
Mm-hmm.
He closed loads of abortion centers because Planned Parenthood became an industry.
Yeah, well, and I think, and Mary Lou Singleton talks about this as well, and people like Carol Downer, but, abortion abortion was taken away from women, and now it's in the hands of the medical establishment, institutions like Planned Parenthood, and in the hands of legislators. And it should never have been like that. I mean, women have been having abortions and performing abortions on one another for centuries. And people think that abortion was just like invented with second wave feminism, and that's not the case.
But also, if you want to solve abortion in some parts of America, you need to assist a little bit with poverty. And you
Of
need to
course.
make sure that people have maternity rights. And you need to make sure that men are held accountable for their offspring. So all of these things contribute to reducing abortion rates. That doesn't mean you make it illegal to access one.
Yeah, right, exactly. Okay, so some questions. This is a very big question, and so feel free to be as brief or not as brief as you like, but I assume you probably answered this question a few times and you might be tired of it. Maybe not. I have a question, Megan. This is from the Angry Bootneck. I've been a fan of Posie's for years, and I'm curious, when did she start her activism, and what was the straw that broke the camel's back?
Okay, so 2015, I found out what was going on because the Conservative Party got elected outright in the UK, and nobody expected it. No, nobody on the left expected it, and I was very much on the left. And I joined this big group, and then these men started. It was supposed to be just for women, and then men started coming in, and then I was like, "This is a bit weird." And they all looked like they looked like truckers in dresses with makeup, and women fawned over them. So the whole thing was interesting. And then I just started, I then just snowballed into what they're doing it to kids, what they actually expect us to call them women, what you have to use she. And then you just find out more and more, don't you? So that's how it started. my activism, like my billboard and T-shirts, started in 2018 when that lovely organisation, Women's Place UK, said some extraordinarily defamatory things about me, and so I was a bit like persona non grata. And I had to find an inventive way of getting the message out because they'd made my name dirt. So I tried to do this anonymous raising of the billboard, and it started like that. Oh, and of course I got interviewed under caution. So Susie Green is my ticket to being well known because I got interviewed under caution in March 2018. And it went in the Times. So I was like the first woman to have police involved with me.
And you were interviewed under caution because you said something on Twitter.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, it was things like transitioning children as child abuse. Susie Green took her son to Thailand to be castrated. Yeah. It was just, Janet Mock is a man, probably. It was those sorts of things.
The kinds of things you should get thrown in prison for saying.
I mean, if only I'd put different objects in my posterior on Twitter just for fun, I would have still been on there.
Well, next time.
Well, I'm unbanned. That's the first thing I'm going to do.
When you're reborn as an autogonophilic man. Okay. Megan Wisdom would love to know Kellie-Jay's thoughts on the airbrushed photo of Thomas in the news coverage. I don't know about this photo. Do you know about this photo?
No, but I'm imagining they're trying to make him look less. He's quite chiseled. He's got quite a male nose. I mean, he's got, weirdly, because he's a man, he's got a man's face. So I don't know about the airbrush pictures. I'm sorry, but I'm not surprised.
And how was your lunch with Michael Knowles?
That was the last time I went to New York.
Okay.
He's very pleasant. I met him and his very beautiful wife with my friend Maddie. It was good. It was a really exclusive, members only, beautiful club. It's nice.
One day that'll be us. One day we'll be as wealthy as the right-wing men who say the same things that we do on Twitter. Sorry, that was a rude thing to say. I like Michael Knowles. I'm not attacking Michael Knowles. I think he's great, but it's frustrating. Did you try to see Biden? Have you ever tried to meet with Biden?
No.
No.
I mean, look, he's not coherent, is he? If he was a force to be reckoned with, I mean, I'm not saying like, oh, yeah, well, I'm not going to bother meeting the president of the United States because he's just not up to scratch. But it's not like other people that you'd want to meet who are leading countries that you'd want to ask a really good question. I just don't think he could answer any question.
No, he's
name,
like
man?
brain dead. Like,
Hey,
he wouldn't
man,
even know
what's
what
your
you were
name?
talking about. Like, I
Yeah,
feel like he
exactly.
wouldn't even understand. Like, he's like, I feel like he's
Like-
just a mannequin.
Yes, I do as well.
He's like
As
a
if he's
wax
like wind
figure.
up and just pushed on. They go, just say this, Joe.
Yeah, they pump him up full of, I don't know, vitamins or something like that. Push him onto stage.
Can you imagine
Roll him
if you
out.
found out there was like 6 of them that they'd all sort of cloned, like just to push on at different times?
I would love that.
I
It's
don't
so
think that is
creepy.
beyond the realms of possibility that because he's got new teeth, new hair, like none of it fits his age. And I just think, I wonder if like you go back and there's like 5 of them switched off.
Okay, Kellie-Jay, Seven Serpents would like to know how much longer you think it will be before there's a turnaround on an institutional level.
Well, I think the public comes first. I think that's why I do what I do, because I think we have to tell the public what's going on and they can influence the institutions. Institutions are all about money. So when you flip the public, you'll flip the institutions, I think, or the corporate institutions. But the other institutions, I think they'll quietly pretend that they never did it.
Yeah.
Everyone
I think
will.
that everyone will. That's what I was going to say. The institutions will pretend, but all people will pretend that they didn't go along with this and support this when it becomes a massive global embarrassment and when everyone is forced to acknowledge the harm that it's done to kids, for example.
Yeah, I think this is like people say you can't put the genie back in the bottle, and I think, I mean, it might come with a little bit of a heterosexual male uprising. It might be a little bit violent. It might, that's kind of the fear, isn't it? That actually it won't just be T either. It'll be LGBT that will feel the backlash of heterosexual men in dresses.
Oh, I see. You think the backlash is, I mean, so are you kind of saying you think there'll be like a right-wing backlash?
Well, I think they're very much there could be, and not right wing conservatives. Like someone wrote to me the other day, goes, "Oh, Ben Shapiro said something about you on Facebook, but he's far right," and I'm like, he's not far right. He's just right wing. He's a right wing. He's a conservative. He's a social religious conservative, but he is not far right. But the actual far right, or the more working class males who don't want. See, I said males and men who don't want pervy men in their daughter's space. I mean, I think they might rise up, but more than that, I think the more stories that come out that many of these men are very predatory, vile, creepy perverts. The more stories we hear like that, Lia Thomas, whatever he is, has been a gift because he has really shone a light in a way that is so visual, like this 6'4" bloke with massive shoulders swimming in a girl's race. I mean, that is quite a perfect illustration to people who have no idea what's going on, just exactly what is going on. I've talked a couple of times on TV over the last day or so, and I'm like, but this is not the most serious issue. They're slicing off the breasts of sort of 12 and 13-year-old girls in the States. That's the bigger issue. But if this is like a gateway to finding out about that, then it can only be a good thing.
Jeffrey Pye asks, how might you approach having a conversation regarding all this with a 14-year-old girl who might compete for moral guidance against the lords of TikTok and so on?
Well, okay. So I think a few things. Number one, you really do have to limit the amount of time your kids spend on the phone. You wouldn't allow them to hang out with fetishy, predatory pedophiles prowling around the place, which is what they do on TikTok. So I think you have to be mindful and limits as opposed to banning, because you don't want your kid to be the only person not on TikTok, right? Because that would be embarrassing for them. But I mean, we have a 5-second rule in this house, which is we say 5 seconds and they've got 5 seconds to bring me their unlocked phones. And if there's any deleted history, then they lose their phones. And until they pay for their own phones, that's what they get. We don't do it very often, but we do it often enough that they know. And I don't feel it's an invasion of privacy, because they know when they get their phones that it's not really their phones, it's just their phones to use. And so that's it. I don't like scroll through their text messages. I just look at the things that I feel could be harmful. So that's one thing. But how would I talk to? I think you have to talk to your daughter. I assume it's your daughter before other people do, and you have to give her some tools in order to process what it is that she's seeing and understanding where it comes from. Like we used to talk to kids about propaganda, about, in the Second World War, what the propaganda looked like. Well, now you have to talk about this propaganda. I think if you're not talking about it, then you are really abandoning your daughter to a whole heap of really dangerous people.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of women several women, who are parents, who are mothers, who have daughters, who have decided they want to start identifying as they, for example, or they want to change their names to a boy's name. And the women don't really necessarily agree with the ideology and think it's kind of silly, but then they feel like they have to go along. This is what they've said to me. They feel like they have to go along because they want to support their daughter, and they're like, well, that's what she wants, and that's what. And I'm, of course, like, I'm like, well, that's not supporting your daughter. That's like destructive and confusing. Right.
Well, if your daughter this is how I see it, right? If my daughter came home at 15 and said, I'm madly in love with John. He's 35, lives down the road, and he's I don't know, driving instructor, whatever he is. But I'm so in love with John, and you must respect that. I'd be like, no, that's not happening. That's just not happening. So I don't think you. I do understand the grip of the cult, but I don't really understand why any parent goes along with it. Like from the off, I think you can very easily just say, right, okay, no internet, no TikTok, no after school clubs. You go to school, you come home. If the school are part of the problem and your daughter seriously getting sucked into the cult and starting binding and things, sorry, but you have to do whatever it takes, which might be give up your job and homeschool your child. Now, that might sound like a really grand thing, like a how dare I say such a thing? Who on earth could do that? But if the alternative is your daughter first, they, then he, then binds, then hysterectomy, then can never get her body back, then you never hear her voice again, then she's on testosterone, then she loses her fertility, now she's got greater risk of cancer, Alzheimer's. Why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you do everything to stop that?
Or if your kid's gonna kind of sever their relationship with you because they've been told that if you don't accept and support and go along with their trans identity, they're abusing you and they're dangerous, that should be pretty terrifying to any parent.
But you've got to know this beforehand, right? If you're not disconnected from your children, you surely know if she comes home and she's talking about, oh, Jane is now John, Susie's going by bloody Ash. These are big red flag warning signs. You have to get into your children's lives. You have to be making sure that you keep really strong bonds. And I know how difficult this is when you've got teenagers, especially I've got one teenager who is more difficult than all the others, or has been more difficult than all the others. And I know that continuing to have these very strong bonds with them, it takes time spent, it takes board games, it takes being ready to listen when they want to talk, it takes discipline, boundaries, routine, all of these things. You have to keep your family bonds really, really strong. Otherwise, you can lose your kids. And even if they are strong, I'm not going to say that there is no chance that you can totally always prevent it. But I do think you really can prevent it if you're a loving, warm, attentive parent. I think it must be much more difficult to lose your kids to this cult, like forever.
Dave asks, this drives me insane too. Why are athletic organizations pretending that testosterone was somehow always the requirement for women's sports or being a man or woman at all? I mean, I guess the thing that drives me crazy is that every time you ever challenge anyone on this, or, when people are defending males competing against women in women's sports, they go to this testosterone thing and they say, well, they've reduced their testosterone, so the testosterone to this specific requirement, as if the only issue is about testosterone. Like, it's not at all the only issue.
Well, there's two things. Number one, we know that men have yada yada, long limbs, different shaped pelvis, different cardiovascular, different muscle fiber, different bone density, everything. We know the male body is very, very different to the female body. However, this idea of testosterone, if any woman wanted to race with the same level as testosterone as Lia Thomas, she would be banned for doping.
Right.
So it's not level. It's not like, I don't think you can reduce a man's level to the level of a woman. I think it's still like 200 times more.
I'm just looking through to see.
I've got about 9 more minutes and then I really do have to go to bed.
Okay.
Sorry. Very sorry.
Okay. It's late. I know you're tired. I mean, when I traveled to the UK and we did an event together, I feel like I didn't sleep at all. Like, I was just like functioning on nothing because of the time change and because of all the action.
Well, I got upgraded to first class on the way home.
Oh, nice. Good work. Good
It's
work.
just a different. You press a button, your bed comes out, your massive TV, champagne on tap. Just, I hate
Traveling like
flying.
regular people sucks. I'm on planes
I
a lot these days, and it sucks. It
what
sucks.
cattle class,
Yeah.
normal
I mean,
economy.
the only time I've ever flown first class is when I was on a plane with my friend Brad Cran, and he was sitting up in first class, and he did me a favor by telling the stewardess that I was like, what did he say? He said, I was his sister-in-law, and I've never flown first class before, and could we just please switch for a little while? And he came back and sent me up and put me in his first class seat, and it was amazing.
Well, I look, if when people pay for me, when people are buying my flights, I cannot, and I'm going on my own. I can't go in economy, otherwise I won't get on the plane because I think I'm going to die. And so it's just it's horrific. I hate flying so much.
Oh,
Uh,
I'm sorry to hear that.
so I do drink a lot before I get on the plane, but also I need to be. I just need to try and sleep because I can't take off and landing, take off especially, and then the first like hour in the air, I send all my kids messages as if I'm gonna die. So they
Oh,
all
that's
get
nice for them.
so they all get if anything, not always if anything happens, but I just want to let you know that I think you're the most incredible, and then whoever it is, it will be different things about them that I adore. Just in case that's the last thing I ever say.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I do that to a certain extent on the plane. I mean, I don't have kids and I can't text my dog, but I,
Do
you
you
know,
try?
you want to. Well, she came on the plane with me to Mexico City last time, and that was very sweet. She is so good. She just slept the whole time and then woke up when I was eating a sandwich, so I had to share with her a bit, and then she went straight
It's
back
so
to bed.
weird that dogs are on flights.
I mean, you don't even notice her. But I don't take her on very many flights, just if it's like a short flight. But okay, so Dustin asks, and then we'll let you go very shortly. Do you think there is a female counterpart to autogynephilia where, for example, women fetishize gay men?
No, absolutely not. I think there is a narcissism in women that identify as trans, but I think there is narcissism throughout many mental illnesses, whether it's anorexia or any of these sort of self-focused things. I think there is narcissism there. So no, I don't think women on the whole have fetishes. I think they can learn fetishes, but I don't think it comes from or is about the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes young women, like to pretend that they're into porn and have fetishes in the same way that men do and they want to pretend like they have sex the same way that men do and that they have the same like libidos that men do. And I think women can have really high libidos. I'm not
Yeah.
saying that for sure. I mean, but I don't get the women who watch porn. Like I'm like I think some of them have just trained themselves, like they've grown up with porn, so they just assume that it's a turn on, and maybe they've trained themselves to be turned on by pornography. But I think a lot of them are kind of just lying. Because why, like as a woman, why would you be turned on by pornography? It's disgusting.
Yeah, so mad. So weird. But yes, I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Ash Brown asks, any plans to visit Canada and meet up with activists there?
Yes, I think it's a closer bet to getting arrested, isn't it? But yes, I do have plans. I mean, let me rephrase. I would like to. Whether that becomes a reality is another issue, but I would like to go to Canada. But I mean, it's insane. It's totally insane in Canada.
Well, we can go now. Like, I mean, I obviously haven't been back to Canada in a long time, and it was just because it was like so hard to travel there, and I just didn't want to bother with all that crap. But it's not as hard now. And because you couldn't hold events in Canada, so there's no point. Like, you couldn't gather in a building or have an audience. But as far as I understand it, they're getting rid of all those restrictions.
It's just quite So when I go away, especially if you go somewhere as far as Canada or the States for me, and the time difference, you have to go for quite a long time. And that is,
Mm.
despite my very equal marriage, my husband's always worked. I haven't. And so when I go away, I mean, I work from home. And even though sometimes I get up at like 5 or 6 and do work and then see the children, take the children to school, come home, work, pick up the children, do dinner, and then he comes home like an hour or so later. So it does become complicated if I go away.
Right. I mean, Canada sucks, to be fair. It's much more fun to go to the US. So I hope that you'll come back to the US again and that we can try to
Maybe we could
meet
do
up or do
Berlin.
something together. That would be cool. I'd go anywhere in Europe. I'm so bored of Canada. I mean, they need it because they need people to shake things up because, Justin Trudeau and his cronies
Have you
have
been on Jordan
taken over.
Peterson's podcast?
No, he doesn't like me for some reason, and I'm not sure why. He won't come on my podcast, and he won't acknowledge that I exist. I've invited him, and he declined. Well, his assistant declined, but he won't. I don't know. I don't know what is. I don't know. I'm pretty sure he doesn't like me for some reason.
Somebody in the chat said, I've raised 4 children. You've worked bloody hard. It's just not paid employment. Yeah, I just don't like calling it work. I just think it was an absolute privilege. It doesn't mean that it wasn't difficult to raise my kids, but there's something about the word work, and I don't like it when and I really appreciate the sentiment that, women sort of think they've done nothing, but I don't think I've done nothing. I've got my 2 older boys are, well, my daughter's 15, my youngest is 30. My 2 older boys are 20 and 19, nearly 19. And I can honestly tell you, they are so brilliant humans that I could introduce them to absolutely anyone, and I know that they would be liked, like as young men, just decent humans. So I do kind of feel that I'm very privileged that I got to do that, and I don't want to confuse it with something as insignificant as work.
The Hollywood Librarian, thank you for the donation. I don't understand this question, so maybe you will, but if you don't, that's okay, because I don't quite get it myself. Catholics' belief system includes transubstantiation.
Yeah, I did theology for my degree.
Oh, okay. I don't really know much about Catholicism or really any religion at all. When the communion wafer becomes the literal, as in literal, body of Christ during Mass, do we have a neo-inquisition, a transquisition, apt comparison, or no? Does that make sense to you?
I'm sure I think he's talking about like the Spanish Inquisition with Catholics. It's really interesting, isn't it? Because that's a faith. So basically, when they go for communion and they drink the wine and they eat the wafer. Do you know about that,
Yes.
Megan?
Yeah.
Right. So that's supposed to be as the literal body of Christ and the literal blood of Christ, right? And it's all about, and then you've got the trilogy of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So there's lots of kind of real faith things. But I think, well, Catholics do believe that's real without believing it's real, but still believe it's real. I don't think anyone really thinks they're eating Jesus, but they also do think they're eating Jesus. So no, I don't think we need to. I think we just need to prove it's a lie. And I think on the basis of organized religion, there is actually an upside, and I don't really see what the upside is to transgenderism.
Oh, I don't. It's the decline of civilization.
Well, Camille Paglia talked about it, didn't she? She said that both ancient Rome and ancient Greece, the last days of which there was a lack of boundaries between the sexes.
Yeah, well, and Douglas Murray writes. I'm not super familiar with Camille Paglia, to be honest, but I know that Douglas Murray wrote about there being like a real obsession with gender and kind of gender play and switching around of gender roles at the end of these civilizations.
Well, I would imagine that's excess, right? So it's the excesses of man in which you've exploited everything. You have everything. It's like an inversion of Maslow's hierarchy. that you get to the top. You've been at the top for so long that you kind of then go mad. You know, we have no purpose. And many of us don't believe in God. I'm an atheist, so I don't believe that I'm working towards a better life. But I have a family, and I have a mortgage, and I have all these other things that mean that I do still have purpose. There's loads of people that have no purpose, and they have no chance of ever getting any purpose because they're not going to get a good job. They're not going to buy a house. They're probably not going to get married and have a family because they've messed up their bodies. So I kind of get it. I mean, America, Jesus, walking around Washington, D.C., how they are not going to have a cannabis psychosis crisis. The whole place stinks of skunk. The whole place. It's insane. And I'm not necessarily anti weed in any shape, but everybody doing it all the time, everywhere you go, no, that can't be good.
I mean, I think that the whole, like, all of woke politics and the things that these people concern themselves with is due to people having too much and not having enough to worry about. I mean, all the ridiculous, microaggressions, all the invented racism, all the, discarding of women's sex-based rights as though we don't need those anymore and they don't matter, as if women in other countries aren't still being subjected to FGM and being put in menstrual huts and, being beaten because they, don't adhere to the rules, and so on and so forth. So somebody finally, well, I'll say finally, do you have a travel schedule? Like, do you have any more plans to, what's your tour dates, Posie?
Well, I am just in the UK over the next few months. So I'm going to Speaker's Corner on Sunday in London, and then I better get my itinerary up. Let me tell you. I know it's on Adult Human Female Store. I got an events. Oh, why would you find my own store? Do you know what it's come up with? The first advert. Sex toys. So I put adulthumanfemale.store in the Google search. Sex toys, adult toys, Love Honey adult shop, and then it's my store. Jesus.
God, ridiculous.
Okay. So on the 27th of March with the Reformers Tree, 24th of April, Reformers Tree, 15th of May will be in Manchester, and then the end of May, again, at the Reformers Tree. And the last Sunday in June, we will be having a picnic in the park with the Reformers Tree. Hopefully it'll be nice weather so everyone can come to that. But
awesome.
They're big. They're big, these Reformers Tree gatherings now. They're sort of 200 people.
Nice.
Good.
Most importantly, what's your astrological sign?
I am a Gemini, but as true to most Geminis, I don't believe in star signs.
Well, that's fine, I suppose. I mean, I'm a Libra, and Libras are the best of all signs, so I do believe. Thank you for joining us this evening, even though you're very tired. It's always very fun to have you on.
You couldn't see because I had a really blurry screen, so I just looked like great.
Yeah, you look great. Exactly. Okay, thanks everyone for coming. What?
We should do this again. Sorry.
Yeah, let's do it again soon. I have like good Wi-Fi for 2 weeks, and then I go back to my old janky Mexican village Wi-Fi, but I'll try to resolve that. But everyone, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Blah, 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 blah. Please support me on Patreon if you like. Thank you. I linked to Posie's YouTube channel in the show notes, as well as to her website, Standing for Women, and I think to your Instagram also.
Thanks.
Okay. Sleep well.
Bye.
Bye.